On an October evening in 1834, a handful of clerks in London were given the most boring task imaginable: clear out all tax files stored beneath the House of Lords. Stacks of paper, tallies carved into wood, records of who owed what to whom, some of them decades old, most of them forgotten. They fed the lot into a furnace, the way you'd throw away junk mail, except the junk mail was the state's ledger. The fire found the draft fed the fire, and by morning, the Palace of Westminster had burned through the night. Those files were the state's archive. Who owed, who paid, who still had a debt, just sitting idle in a drawer. A government can gracefully lose a debate and still survive, but without names, dates, and signatures, the law has no ground to stand on. A passport decides borders, a court file decides custody, a land title decides who sleeps in the house tonight, and money is the biggest record of them all. It decides whether you eat, whether you rest, whether you can afford to say no. A bank run looks dramatic on camera. People crowding the sidewalk, hands in fists, voices rising. But inside the crowd, the real sound is quieter. Pick one person, a woman in her 60s doing math with her hands shaking. Her mind is no longer on the crowd. It is on groceries, a prescription she cannot put off, and whether the landlord will wait another week. The world contracts quickly when money is uncertain. Now it all depends on whether the bank still says yes. In a drought, a well becomes sacred. In a financial panic, a working ATM does the same thing. So here's the question that runs this entire episode. Why does money work at all? Why do billions of people wake up every morning and accept paper, digits, and promises in exchange for the real substance of their lives? Food, time, safety, a future they can plan. My claim is simple. Money behaves like a religion. It has rituals and ranks. It has gatekeepers who decide who belongs. It has blessings and punishments. It has holy days, payday, rent day, tax day. And it has a sacred book, an official record of who owns what and who owes what. Once your life depends on that book, you start obeying it the way people have always obeyed their gods. If you want to feel how religious it really is, watch yourself on a Monday morning. You open your banking app and your body tenses before you even log in. You're scanning for approval, for forgiveness, for a sign that you can exhale for another week. Then you do the rituals, you upload documents, you prove you deserve access, you explain yourself to someone behind a desk or a chatbot. Modern bureaucracy calls that compliance. In human terms, it feels like confession. And when you fail a ritual, late payment, missed bill, overdraft, punishment arrives quietly, with a fee, a flag, a higher rate. The door is still open, but they open slower, and everyone pretends there's nothing strange about it. You're watching Theorem Noir. I want you to hold 3 objects in your mind as we go. A salvation receipt from a medieval church, a deposit balance on your banking app, and a tokenized share recorded on a blockchain. 3 relics from 3 chapters of history. Different surfaces, different centuries, but the same engine underneath. A claim written into a record, backed by an authority that can reward you or ruin you. At first glance, they do not belong in the same story. But stay with me, none of these objects are innocent. Before coins existed, before banks had names, money already had its job description. Early societies needed a way to track what strangers owed each other. Grain stored, labor promised, penalties stacked, taxes due. So a unit appears. Maybe it's a weight of silver, maybe a standardized measure of barley. Then the ruler makes the symbol unavoidable. He demands taxes in that unit. And overnight, everyone needs it. Imagine a merchant in one of those early states. He accepts the unit because taxes are due, guards have spears, and the record already knows his name. He works to earn the unit, he trades to hold the unit, and on deadline day, he hands it back. That loop, earn it, hold it, return it, turns obedience into habit. That's where money stops being a unit and starts becoming a command. Ledgers are good for collection. They are less good at making people tremble. For that, power prefers a crowd, a little firelight, and someone the whole city is supposed to remember. The Romans crucified Jesus in public, and the spectacle was designed to work exactly the way it did, as a warning stamped into collective memory. One execution, thousands of witnesses, and the message echoed for generations. But what Jesus left behind was something that power structures genuinely fear. He left a set of teachings that gracefully disarm the tools empires depend on. Forgive your enemies, give to those who have nothing, refuse to worship status, help the poor. If you take those ideas seriously, fear recedes, greed loses its grip, and you become harder to control. An empire needs you hungry for status. It needs you competing for scraps. It needs you too exhausted to look up and ask who carved the rules into stone. A community built on compassion and inner awareness resists all of that naturally. It holds still when the empire needs it to scatter. That makes it dangerous. After his death, the story multiplied. Through mouths, through grief, through memory. Truth has a strange quality. You can pressure it, delay it, bury it under noise, but it keeps finding cracks the way water finds its way through rock formation. Communities formed around the teachings, and they grew. The empire watched nervously and decided on a move that was brilliantly simple. Instead of fighting the message, redirect the attention. Turn Jesus himself into a symbol, a cross, a promise of hope, and let the institution build a gate around that symbol and call the gate salvation. And that is what the church did. It placed itself between the crowd and heaven, between fear and relief. Jesus had asked for a changed life, a turn inward, a consciousness rooted in presence and love. The church steered attention away from that personal revolution and toward spectacle and ritual, making the image of Jesus central while naming itself the only authorized link between you and your own salvation. A gate changes everything. Once a gate exists, it becomes a machine. It sorts people into the worthy and the unworthy, the clean and the dangerous. It decides which rituals count as proof of loyalty. And over time, people stop thinking about the teachings and start thinking about the gate. Picture a villager in medieval Europe who cannot read, standing under a vaulted ceiling 40 meters high, listening to Latin he will never understand, watching a ritual he's told is sacred. Understanding was never the requirement, belonging was, and that's the exact moment when an institution becomes more powerful than the message it claims to protect. And now look at what they built. Walk through any old European city and you'll see it. A cathedral so enormous it dominates the skyline from every direction. Gold leaf on the ceilings, marble quarried from the mountains, stained glass shipped across countries, stone so rare and so heavy that entire generations gave their lives just holding it into place. Fathers laid the foundations, their sons built the walls, their grandsons raised the spires, and their great-grandsons applied the finishing materials to a building they would never see completed. Ask yourself a blunt question. Why? Why does a place of worship for a man who said, "Give everything to the poor," need to be plated in gold? Why does it need the rarest stone, the tallest ceiling, the most expensive materials a civilization can produce? Because the building is for you. When something is that massive, that permanent, that overwhelmingly present in your daily life, your mind starts to treat it like a fact of nature. You see it from every street. You pass it on the way to work. It was there before you were born, and it will be there long after you're gone. And slowly, in the silence of repetition, your brain starts to whisper, "This must be true. This thing is too big, too old, too beautiful to be wrong. Everything I do on the side, my work, my little problems, my doubts, feels tiny compared to what this monument represents. A passageway to God, a promise of salvation, a reason to keep obeying." That is the hidden function of a monumental architecture. It just stands there, generation after generation, silent and patient, until it becomes the psychological North Star of an entire population. And once a building like that sits at the center of your city and the center of your mind, questioning the institution behind it starts to feel almost absurd. The church knew how to turn belonging into a weapon. A pope could excommunicate a king, remove him from the Christian community with a single declaration. Picture the fallout. A king wakes up and finds his name erased from the record that says he belongs. Then the merchants hesitate. Allies go silent. Trade dries up. And the rivals who'd been waiting in the shadows start to sharpen their knives, because the story spreading through every court in Europe is simple and lethal. God has turned his back on this man. When a system controls the record of belonging, it can make someone safe or make someone disposable with a line change in a ledger. That is power. And it's the same power a bank holds when it freezes your account or a government holds when it flags your passport. Different tools, same architecture. Move to Europe in the early 1500s. People are living close to hunger, close to disease, close to grief. Death sits nearby, familiar, visible, ordinary, and the fear that haunts everyone has a name: purgatory, a waiting room of suffering after death, where your sins are slowly burned away before you're allowed into heaven. Into that fear, the church offered a piece of paper. An indulgence was sold as a document that could reduce your time in purgatory or the time of someone you loved. It turned sorrow into leverage and fear into revenue. Imagine someone you love is suffering behind a wall you can't see through. You can't reach them, can't hold them, can't ease their pain. But you can pay. And the church will write a receipt that says the sentence just got shorter. That's the brilliance of the scheme. It turns helplessness into an action. When grief has nowhere to go, this salvation document brings closure. Coins in, paper out, a seal in wax, and the slip becomes proof that an invisible account somewhere changed in your favor. In one of the most notorious waves of these sales, the revenue helped fund the construction of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, one of the most expensive buildings on earth, rising on the backs of millions who bought relief by the page. Hold that loop in your mind. A coin turns into a receipt. The receipt turns into relief. Relief turns into loyalty. What you're about to see is the same loop wearing a very modern suit. Now the receipt is a screen. You open your banking app and the number tells your nervous system whether the week ahead is stable or fragile. That number decides whether you shop freely or freeze in front of the price tag. It decides whether a surprise bill is annoying or terrifying. It does all of that silently, instantly, without anyone raising their voice. The machinery stays hidden, which is exactly why it feels normal. Here is the mechanism most people never see in motion. Banks create much of the money we use through lending. When a bank issues a loan, it records two things simultaneously. The borrower now owes the bank, and the bank now owes the borrower a deposit. That deposit is new money, conjured into existence as an entry in a ledger, the same way a priest once wrote a name into a registry. But banks face consequences for the promises they write. Losses pile up when borrowers default. Rules dictate how much capital they must hold. And then there is the brutal reality of the moment when too many customers ask for cash at the same time. That's when you meet the back room. Deposit insurance, emergency lending, the invisible relationship between commercial banks and central banks. In a crisis, the central bank becomes the high priest of the system, deciding who gets a lifeline and who drowns. And credit scores. Credit scores are the moral scoreboard that appeared without a vote. Two people can earn the same salary and live in completely different realities because one three-digit number makes borrowing cheap and another makes borrowing punishing. A priest once asked for confession. A bank asks for a score. Different century, same gate. If the system can create money by typing numbers, why does poverty still exist? Why does hunger still exist? Why do people sleep in cars while a signature can conjure a deposit out of thin air? Because a number in a ledger is a claim, and a claim only means something when the physical world can honor it. The real economy runs on things you can touch: food, housing, energy, labor, land, time. Every time the system creates new money, it enters at the top, through government spending, through bank lending, through doors that ordinary people will never walk through. The people closest to the source buy assets. The assets rise, and by the time the ripple reaches the bottom, it shows up as higher rent, pricier groceries, and a paycheck that buys less every month. And here's the part that should make you angry. The world has more capacity than it admits. Food is wasted at industrial scale. Harvests rot because they fail to fit a profit model. Homes sit empty as investment vehicles while families share bedrooms. Hunger could be ended with smarter distribution and less waste. The obstacle is rarely the planet. The obstacle is power. Who controls land, logistics, markets, and the rules of the record? Scarcity keeps people obedient. Scarcity keeps people grateful for crumbs. Scarcity keeps people blaming themselves instead of questioning the gatekeepers. The religion of money runs on your wallet and on your attention in equal measure. Payday arrives and vanishes into bills. Holidays arrive and become shopping events. Subscriptions appear quietly on your statement like small parasites that learn to stay polite. And debt becomes so normal that questioning it feels dramatic. Zoom out and watch the longer ritual. You work, you pay, you recover just enough to work again. You get older, you get afraid, you start buying safety in 1,000 small pieces. Insurance, warranties, subscriptions, upgrades. Then you have a child, and the system hands you a new checklist. Buy this for the birthday, do that because it's tradition, spend this because everyone else does. Your calendar fills itself, and your mind never gets quiet enough to ask what you're actually doing with your one life. Now add the attention machines. Every scroll is an auction. Your pause is valuable. Your anger is valuable. Your fear is profitable. The feed needs you to react, because reaction is revenue and reaction shortens thought. When a nervous system lives in reaction mode, it becomes easier to control. You accept the next payment plan, the next distraction, the next small reward that gets you through the week without ever sitting still long enough to meet yourself. Noise becomes a form of control, because it steals the one thing you'd need to break the pattern: your consciousness. Now the story changes costume. blockchains, tokens, stablecoins. If those words feel distant, think of a casino chip. A casino chip is a claim, a promise from the house that it owes you value. You trust it because you trust the rules and the cash disk. A blockchain is a shared notebook that records who holds which chips, with copies spread across many places at once, so rewriting the page becomes harder. A token is the chip inside that notebook, and a stablecoin is a chip designed to behave like $1, backed by reserves its issuer is supposed to hold. Tokenization is what happens when old money decides to move its receipts into a new system. Your fund share becomes a token. A government bond becomes a token. A building gets sliced into thousands of digital chips that people can trade in minutes instead of months. It can make markets smoother, but it can also make control smoother, because rules can be written directly into how the token moves. A traditional bank freezes your account after a phone call and some paperwork. A tokenized system can freeze your chip automatically because the restriction lives inside the code itself. Here's the Noir version of the future. You tap to pay. The screen stays friendly. The system refuses. Your account enters review. Your request enters a queue. Everything remains polite. The door simply stops opening, and that's why the rules matter more than the technology. Whoever writes them decides who gets access, who gets frozen, who gets ignored, and who gets an apology that changes nothing. A parliament burns because files turn to ash. A crowd forms outside a bank because a promise might break. A church sells relief on parchment. A bank sells relief on a screen. A new system sells relief through code. Different centuries, same wiring. Fear looks for a gatekeeper. The gatekeeper offers a receipt. The receipt buys obedience, and obedience, generation after generation, builds empires. Keep 3 questions in your pocket as you leave. Who keeps the record? Who holds the keys when things go wrong? And what happens to ordinary people when fear hits the system? The endgame was never digital currency. The endgame is a population too busy, too distracted, and too tired to remember who they are. Whoever controls the ritual controls the world. If you want a way forward, start with something small. Protect your attention. Build pockets of silence into your day. Read something long once in a while. Keep your nervous system on a tighter leash. Build a life where you can hear yourself think. Because a system can manage your money. That's its job. Just make sure it stays out of your mind. Every video on this channel is built to earn your attention. If it did that today, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. If someone you know needs to hear this, share it with them. And if you have something to say, whether you loved it or think I missed the mark, the comments are open and I read all of them. I've also set up a Buy Me a Coffee page for anyone who wants to support what I'm building here. There's no paywall, no premium content, just a way to say keep going. And I will. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next theorem.